Hey everyone, Mark Hayward here from the Absolute Business Mindset podcast and YouTube channel. Thank you very much for joining me today. We have a really interesting conversation with Jan Cavelle, who is an author, writer, and speaker about entrepreneurship. So we talk about her early days on living on a farm and then that move into London, which kind of opened up avenues. She then started a furniture business as a single mother and worked there for 19 years, building and growing that business. We talk about the struggles of entrepreneurship and starting a business and running a business. And we talk about resilience, persistence, and the mental health struggles that Jan has faced. I really appreciated her being open and honest and sharing her experiences. And I think that could be really resonate with people that are watching this video now. She talks passionately about writing articles and writing books and how that's been pivotal for her growth as a person. And I really saw that and heard that from her when she was talking about how much she loves writing. We then cover a broad subject of how governments are and sometimes aren't helping entrepreneurs and business owners. And I think there's some really important stuff in there as well. So hopefully you will enjoy that. Look, I'm really looking forward to you hearing this and watching this video. If you are enjoying this, please do give it a like. Please do give it a subscribe and hit the bell icon as well. And you will get all of these messages or when all of these podcasts are being released. Thank you so much for your time. Please do leave any comments below if you've got anything you want to share with me. I do look at the comments, so please do share this widely. Thank you so much for your time. I really do appreciate it. Enjoy your day and enjoy the podcast. Today we have Jan Cavelle, who's an author, writer, speaker who talks about entrepreneurship. Hello, Jan. How are you today?
I'm great. Thank you very much. How are you?
Yeah, I'm really good. Thank you very much for joining me today. We're going to talk through your career, your businesses, how about your writing, which is very important to you at the moment with books and articles and things that you've done. Hopefully we'll have a lot of fun. The podcast is called Absolute Business Mindset. Well, as we start always, what does a business mindset mean to you?
I think a business mindset to me means really being in the flow, sort of really focused on whatever you're doing. It doesn't, to me, matter who you are, what you do, what you choose to do. It's your passion, your focus. But unless it's absorbing you to that point of everything else can go away, I think then you're not going to perform well enough as a business.
It's interesting you talk about the flow state, which is you talked about focus, but I've done a couple of podcast things about the flow state. How do you actually get into the flow state? Is it a preparation to be able to get into that flow state, or is it just the passion that you have for your business that pushes you that way?
For me, I personally speaking, it's definitely all about the passion. If I want the passion and possibly a touch of be-mindedness. I thought I'll rein that back just a little bit, but that stubbornness, but means that you're done going to do it, come what may.
And
when I'm writing, I mean, I just, oh, how's he spending that time? Yeah, well, wait a second.
So let's just touch on writing. We're going to talk about your books and your articles. So, but you started writing articles and you wrote for The Real Business for 10 years. And we'll talk about the entrepreneurial journey in a minute, but how did the entrepreneurial journey move into writing where it's become such a major part of your life?
Good question. I always wanted to do it, even when I was a child. That was what I wanted to be, was a writer. And I saw, by pure chance, I saw Real Business put a shout out for any entrepreneurs willing to share a diary of what it's really like to be an entrepreneur. Because, of course, um, I'm sure you'll get the same. There are an awful lot of puff pieces we all write about. We are marvelous and life is sunny all the time. When the reality is that it's a little tougher than that. And they wanted people who would actually cough up and say, I've had a dreadful day and it's horrible here and I'm running out of cash and I'm worried sick, or, all the things that happen to entrepreneurs. And I thought, well, why not? I've seen it. I'll write, nothing will happen. They'll never come back to me, but I'll put in an application and say, I'll do it. And they said, well, write a trial. And that was it. I
Do
started,
you find writing easy as
absolutely loved it from that moment. And it was my stress reliever, and I had to be careful, obviously, not to say, Joe Bloggs down the hall is just insane. But for all that, it was a very good way of actually, getting a bit of stress out. And again, me time, which we don't often have as entrepreneurs.
and I must, so I'm an entrepreneur myself. I own a couple of businesses and doing this podcast, and to be honest, podcast, I've done nearly 400 episodes for coming up to 5 years. Absolutely love it. Writing, I find it quite tricky. I don't find it very easy. Do you find so? So what my point is that this is a great stress reliever for me to speak to great
Yeah.
guests and understand their processes, their systems, how they got there is just absolutely fascinating for me. But writing, I always find it's more of a struggle for me. But for you, how do you find it easy to write an article or something? Is it your flow state?
Yeah, it's very much my flow state when I get going. Sometimes, I have the writer's block, which we all suffer from of, oh, I'm overdue an article. What on earth have I got to say? But, other days I'll wake up and I think, I've got to clear some space in my diary. I need to write this, and that's the end of everything else for the next hour.
Yeah, well, okay. We'll come back to your books in a little bit, but I just want to ask you a question about your upbringing. So tell me something about your upbringing that is meaningful, that's related to you becoming an entrepreneur.
Another good question. I mean, I was a farmer's daughter. So, of course, there's an element of very definitely running a business there that you grow up and, conversation has to go on hold if one of the cows is having trouble or, whatever. So there's that sort of exclusively focused on a business, if you like. So I think there was that which helped. I think probably growing up quite solitary because on a farm back in those days, there wasn't tremendous ability to socialize. You were in the middle of nowhere and your parents were busy with the farm. And so I didn't really socialize that much. And so I had my books and was completely happy on my own. So it taught me an awful lot of self-resilience, which I think also goes with being an entrepreneur.
And what were some of those books that you were reading as a child? What were they that really stick out in your mind?
Well, early on, my mother had a big thing that you shouldn't have. Your child shouldn't be allowed anything remotely popular in the way of literature, should I say? But it was very much classics only. I mean, of an evening when everybody else was getting bedtime stories, I got the complete works of Dickens or Shakespeare. Um, but for my own reading, I was allowed the childhood classics, and she grew up. My grandmother was American, so the literature tended to be very American. So it was, I think, the classics like Little Women is probably still the best one known now. And of course, immediately there was, Joe was, I don't know if you've been made to sit through Little Women over the years.
No, it's not.
There is four daughters, and there's the one who is the misfit who doesn't like all the, fancy balls and the girly stuff. And she loves her books and she loves her writing. And that made perfectly good sense to me. I had absolutely no wish to play girly stuff. So I think in the same pattern.
Yeah, I get that. I've got two daughters, 6 and 8, and very, very different, very different approach to life, different activities, different interests. It shocks me how different they are at such a young age.
Fascinating.
Yeah. So we give an example of, like, we asked my eldest daughter to go tidy her room. She might not want to do it, but she'll go and she'll do it, and she's mimicked how to tidy up, that she can do it at 8 years old. My 6-year-old just walks in and doesn't know what to do, isn't interested, doesn't want to have it as a nice zone or a chill zone. It's chaos. Everything is chaotic. So we do think that they're going to go in totally different avenues and different things. So yeah, it's very interesting. I think that's as a child you don't really perceive it, but as a parent you definitely see the differences between two children that are quite young and quite close to age as
Yeah.
well. So were you an only child?
I wasn't, but my sister was a sort of a decade older than me, so, and she was off at boarding school. So I mean, I'm not in. I might as well have been.
Yes. Okay. And before we go into the furniture company, so you spent time as a farmer's daughter, and you got educated, and books were obviously important into your.
Ish. Let's not exaggerate the education, but
Okay. And so what was that transition, the teenage years into your 20s? How did you transition from farming into entrepreneurship?
well, I like increasingly with reading and personality. I guess I got more wanting my independence quite early, so I moved off to London and therefore had to work to support myself, which is fair enough. But I wasn't terribly qualified to do anything really. So, I mean, I got all sorts of pretty grotty jobs. And on the whole, very quickly, I didn't like that very much. I mean, particularly if I was, I mean, I'd much prefer actually doing a sort of dishwashing job to sent to an office where people were, or inevitably you were working for particularly tedious. I mean, we're going back an awful long while, but it really was women in the typing pools in the corner, and
Right.
it wasn't my thing. And I was preferring these very smug idiots trying to tell me how to be or what to do, and it just drove me insane very quickly. And so I thought, I'll do anything but not go to work and not, do that. So I came across a woman who I helped for a bit who was doing picture research, and she was working from home, and I'd go in the morning and, she'd probably have overslept, and there'd still be last night's wine bottles on the table, and I thought, this is not like it. But she worked very hard. I mean, once we started, we were, but that was fine. I didn't have a problem with hard work. I just wanted to be my own boss, really early on. So I did all sorts of things, without any particular care about what they were, grotty and otherwise, but setting up independently for sort of 6 months here and there.
Right.
But it worked.
So let's then fast forward to setting up the Jan Cavelle Furniture Company.
No, absolutely not. I mean, the plan at that stage was just to keep out of the hands of employers.
Okay.
Again, sort of from where the generation I was at and the background I was at, I guess, we were very much brought up to get married and have children. So, a long-term career. I mean, I'd actually, as I say, wanted to be a writer, toyed with being a journalist, but couldn't be bothered to study hard enough to get to university. And so, a long-term career didn't really cross my mind at all, which is shocking to me now, but it didn't. So the furniture company was only a means to an end because I ended up being divorced and really stony broke and having to sit with 2 children to support. So I had to do something, and it started as a selling operation
So you used to find
with the kids. Yeah,
furniture and then sell it on.
absolutely. So
And
I mean, I was selling on the phone while the children played in the next door room and
right.
buying stuff in and sending it on.
So you describe it as starting from your kitchen table with small young children.
Exactly, it literally was.
Where were you sourcing the furniture from?
Local craftsmen, we were out in the sticks, and I reckon there would be. It was. I mean, it was so. There wasn't research. How do you research a business? I'd have told you.
Mm.
It was as mental as that. and I had really limited business skills, if any. But I did think there were probably good people who worked on craftsmanly type of things locally, and I had a few contacts, and so I thought, well, that will do. And then I'll buy pre-computer days. I'll buy Yellow Pages and get contacts and ring them up and say, here's me.
And how did that business develop? Because
Slowly. But I mean, that was partly in that I was restricted, juggling motherhood as well, of course. But it was also, I had no capital, I had no knowledge, and just really didn't know which way it was going at all. But it did. I mean, there was the first year there were terrible moments of I can't do this, and I mean one literally where I got to, it was a Friday afternoon and thought, okay, and I called somebody and said, this is it. And then the Saturday morning I was still upstairs and I heard the fax machine go, and there was another order when I came downstairs, and I thought that's enough for another week. But it was that near the knuckle.
right. And you talked about earlier on about your ability to have resilience. I assume you had to tap into resilience. It's one of the things that entrepreneurs should know. To an element, you should remain patient because things do work out. You need to turn up, you need to show up every day, and you need resilience when things don't go your way. How did you package that for your business? You did it for 19 years and your children grew up whilst you were running.
I did it for 90 years.
19.
I hope I don't look quite that old.
No, 19 years. Well, the research I saw, you were doing it for 19 years. Is that correct?
Yeah, 19 years. That's more like it. Yes. Glad I misheard you there. But yeah, I know. It was, like I say, it was a slow burn. I mean, for the first few years when the children were still very, very small, it really stuck at initially me, and then some friends, a couple of, really one friend initially, and meant two, in a tiny corner of a barn, starting to make stuff ourselves. It was probably about 7 or 8 years in, if not, no, probably about that, when I ended up acquiring because there was no choice, the main person making my furniture's business. And therefore there were sort of two cottage industries. And I thought, okay, better put them together because, that's not workable. So I'll have a bigger business. Still not knowing what I was doing. And, 6 months later, I found myself with a factory building and enormous debt and thinking, what have I done? I'm going to have to make
It's really interesting the way you're describing this, Jan, because there seems to be such purpose in you representing the UK government, you writing for the articles at Real Business, you writing a book, The Scale for Success, which has been hugely successful. It sounds like your early days with the furniture company, it wasn't that you didn't have purpose, but you weren't really sure what you were doing. How did you formulate that business into being successful?
I think there was a huge element of I have to do this for children, and I have to make it work, whatever making it work means.
Yeah.
And then once we got the factory, I was so much in debt because I took on a factory with no way of paying for it, and didn't realize quite how expensive it would be. And, so I had to grow fast to get out of debt. I didn't dare tell anybody what I'd done. I got in such a mess, so it was just, dig out of this hole, really.
And you say when I was doing the research that you stayed in the business too long. What do you mean by that?
I'm very happy to talk about that. I mean, I think it's a mistake which a lot of entrepreneurs fall into. To my own surprise, excuse me. To my own surprise, as much as anybody else, I did get the thing off the ground. We did grow very fast and got another factory. And, all of a sudden it was a successful business and, awards flying in and all the skunk that goes with that. And equally, offers for business started coming in, as they do. And I thought, oh, no, I mean, this is my life. I want to stay there. And coupled with the fact that my children were getting older, they were beginning to start to leave home. And there was talk of them joining a business at various stages. I mean, my son did work for me for several years. And so, was it going to be a succession business? I just hadn't made a proper plan because I never intended to have a proper business. So it just drifted. And of course, that's very dangerous, I think. I was getting, I mean, I got some really very decent offers, or particularly one for the business, and I turned it down. And that was very silly.
And did you sell the business in the end?
I broke it up. It was a fire sale. I got to a pitch where I just wound myself down. I mean, the children had gone by that stage, and I was getting physically worn out completely and had all sorts of health issues and everything. And what would be recognised as burnout? No, I mean, I spent my life at the doctors, either physically or mentally shaking, and I was just a mess. And just I suddenly thought, enough's enough. And a competitor wanted to buy the brand, and I thought, okay. And I spoke to the advisors and said, I want to do this. And they said, you sure you can build it up again? I mean, look at your track record,
Mm.
I said, yeah, just get me out, walk away. Don't care about the money.
Mm. And you said about and I want to be open with the idea of mental health. One of the things I talk about on my podcast is about mental health, especially for entrepreneurs, can be incredibly difficult. In your example, you probably stayed a little bit too long. Some people that struggle to get to success, and once they reach the peak, they get to success, whatever that means, if it's a number or employees or whatever it is, that they struggle with that. How was it for you with your mental health when you were struggling?
I think it was tough. There were various times, and I take your point entirely that sometimes it's when you're successful that and achieve all those things. And I certainly had a sort of issue with that when the business was really successful because I'd hit all the markers, I'd paid off all the debt, got the kids upright and on their way, And so what now?
Mm,
So
mm,
what's happening? Was that right call in life? And
mm,
you start to there's no purpose, there's no drive.
mm,
And so that's a big empty hole. I mean, obviously there's the empty nest syndrome, but it's similar to all the purposes of aiming for success, all those years of growth and getting there. That can be very tough. But like you, I mean, I've studied a bit of this link between entrepreneurship and mental health, and I think it's pretty well proven now that there is a propensity to mental health challenges within entrepreneurs. We are such all or nothing people. We drive ourselves so hard. And many of us have had some form of childhood trauma, all of which is recognized figures, but actually we're the highest sort of sector of people at risk from mental health challenges, and even from sort of a touch of OCD onwards. But yeah, it goes hand in hand often, I think.
So what would you say, it's a bit of a cliche question, but I think it's very relevant to this conversation. What would you say where you are now, hopefully in a good place, where would you say, what would you say to that person starting the business, the furniture company those years ago, to give them, and this is open to entrepreneurs and business owners or want to be entrepreneurs, business owners that are listening here, what would you say to them to sort of encourage them or a lesson that would help them?
I think that it's very important to have a good support team, which, of course, as a single parent is very hard to get because you're under sea left, right, and centre. But I think that a good support team, ideally other entrepreneurs, I mean, it was something I came across much, much later. The ones who actually understand what you're going through and you can talk confidentially to them about whatever's happened, and let off steam rather than keep it all in. I think that's very important. I think looking after yourself physically is terribly important. There's a tendency to go for it, go for it, go for it, and work too hard all the time. So that actually you're making yourself ill, and that endangers your mental health in itself. So I think that's very important.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I really think it's something, words like freedom, and one of the reasons I became an entrepreneur was for wanting freedom. But you do work harder in some cases in different ways, and there's different stressors. And I think that's, so I was in corporate for 14 years and then started my businesses, and the different stressors that I experienced when everything is down to me, like, it's slightly exaggeration. You have people supporting you, you have employees and management and whatever,
Yeah,
but everything is on you. You have
your
to make the
shoulders.
decisions. How have you come? How have you worked out? And this will sort of lend into the writing stage of when you were started writing for Real Business originally. How did you want to communicate that? The resilience, the strength, the mental health issues, the thing. How did you want to communicate that through your writing?
Through my writing.
Through your writing, yeah.
I think that's proved to be part of it. I think initially when I got out of business, I was so gone. I thought, I'll just retire. I've had enough of everything. But it lasted a very short time. I mean, it was so overdue me getting out that I perked up really fast and realised that it was 100% the right decision if late. But what I'd really missed was writing. And so I thought, well, I've got to get back to that. And then I thought the only thing I know to write about is entrepreneurship, so I'd better do that as well. But yeah, I mean, it's been absolutely lovely for me. I mean, I've made a life I absolutely adore as a result. Very low key, but that's fine. That suits me. And I think the mental health aspect of writing came in. I wrote an article for Medium, remember now, probably a couple of years ago, and it was on mental health and entrepreneurship and the links. And it still actually has the highest number of readership, of all Medium articles I've done. And so it's something I've become a little bit identified with. Plus, I don't care about talking openly about it. To be honest, I got attacked when I had the business so much on social media because I would say to people, I do suffer from anxiety or whatever. And kids who work for me and things, would go on social media and say, yeah, she's not, she told me. So, you learn to rise above it. And eventually, I realized that actually being open, I could possibly help somebody else.
Do you think social media, specifically you mentioned about social media, do you think social media for an entrepreneur is a force for good, or is it is there the, as you say, the trolling, the criticizing, the side of it? How do you see social media?
I had a horrible experience with it. It was very one of those things that took hold. A couple of disgruntled ex-employees started this site, and it was extraordinary. You read all these people you'd never heard of going, "Oh, she's horrible," and it was an awful period. And friends would say, "Why are you letting them sketch you?
Mm,
This is what happens with businesses."
mm.
I did find it really, really hard.
Yeah, I think for me, I think social media is, I use it more now from a business point of view. For example, the podcast.
Mm,
I'll publicize the podcast. I'm not in the space of taking a picture of my kids when I'm out with them, or
yeah,
what I'm eating. I won't share on social media. That I find that actually a little bit weird, to be honest, when people
I
are
get that.
sharing on Facebook and Instagram and TikTok and things
Mm,
like that when they're doing things. I see it very much as a vessel that can be very positive, but equally there is always a dark side to
there
Twitter
is.
and
Yeah.
Instagram and places like that, because people, when you attack people, I heard this really interesting thing with Andrew Tate, who's in social. He's very, very outspoken. And there was another guy, the fitness guy. Anyway, he was saying that when someone is criticizing somebody else, they actually have an element of jealousy, and they want to be where the person they're criticizing is. So if that person that was trolling, criticizing you on social media, probably wanted your success, probably wanted to be an entrepreneur and maybe wasn't able to, or whatever. So when people are looking up, they'll criticize and they'll get numbers. There will be an element of virality because of people like, unfortunately, bad news and criticism. So
Mm.
what's your sort of view on people looking up to criticize?
I think that's certainly true. I think there's a pack element that, and it appears fun that everybody's, do you know what so and so wrote last night?
Yeah.
So it's something that people can join in and get together and share. But I do find it strange. It's odd. I don't know whether it's admiration or what. I think I have to say, and this may sound a little bit old-fashioned, but of course, being in manufacturing, I was off, sometimes the only woman in before
Mm,
people. So there was an element of challenges involved with that, with being a female boss,
absolutely.
and probably more people given to being unhappy with that, or uncertain with that, or
Mm.
willing to put her back in her place.
Yes, I think you're right. I think, and you talk about supporting women, representing women within the UK government for an EU campaign. And was that important for you? Did you feel, because when I was doing my reading about you, you were saying that it ended up being important, not necessarily being a woman, but being an entrepreneur was actually the important aspect of that.
I think that's true. I mean, I was asked to join that particular campaign, which was an all-female one to sort of get more women to consider entrepreneurship, because at that stage, very few people did, leave alone lots of women. And so I had the brief of going to schools and universities and small business groups and encouraging entrepreneurship. And we went out to Brussels, to the European Parliament, and met other groups of females from other countries and discussed what they were doing and how it was for them. So it was certainly interesting, but I found I loved going out to mixed groups, not necessarily just women. I mean, I do think there ought to be more women entrepreneurs.
Absolutely.
I'm never very keen on sectoring people up, because I just think humans are humans, in my sweet simple way. So I'm quite keen on getting involved with all entrepreneurship campaigns. I
Absolutely.
did get involved in many more after that, but I was asked to get involved in, be it again, sort of speaking, mentoring, whatever. Uh,
Amazing.
right.
Amazing. Right. Want to give you plenty of time to talk about your first book, Scale for Success, and you've got a new book coming out soon. So tell me about the transition from writing articles into actually writing a book.
Well, it was, but as I say, a childhood dream, and I was scribbling away, and sort of after a couple of winters, I think, and thinking of doing my articles, and thinking, shall I have a crack at a book? But what could I do? And am I really good enough to do that? Do I know enough to do that? And I thought, you've got to try. And I had a couple of starts and showed them to writing coaches who told me that I didn't know what I was doing as part of a learning curve, and cried copiously and pulled myself together and had another go. Because this was something that clearly mattered to me an awful lot. And eventually I did get a book, sort of, which in the end was Scale for Success, about half written. And then I began to think, hold on, a lot of people's time has gone into this, and a lot of my time has gone into this. I ought to have a crack at getting a publisher. And so I spoke to Bloomsbury and got published, which was
Amazing.
a very lucky.
How was that? How did you manage to get signed up by a publishing
I know
company?
it was a bit of a dream thing. It was one of those extraordinary pieces of luck, actually. I mean, I thought, I think I chose 3 publishing agents, but not agents, but publishers to have a go at. And it was just coming up to a Christmas. And so I was trying to get emails lined up for submission, to get submission forms and things. And I tried to email Bloomsbury, who was on my list, and damn email wouldn't go through. And I was tired and cross. So I got on Twitter and sent an email to them. Your email's not working. And a really nice editor came back and said, well, send it to my private email.
Amazing.
I got past the initial assessment and straight to the person I needed to talk to.
Oh, that's amazing. What a great
There's an
story.
element of feeling this is an incredible piece of luck, which it was. And, also,
Hold up, Jan. I really don't think it's that much luck. You're actually pursuing this, and you're driving it forward, and you're reaching out to people. You didn't get the email. It then went to Twitter. You then found it's not luck. Luck has nothing to do with it, Jan. It has to do with perseverance, persistence, making sure you're moving forward. I don't think it's luck.
back to my B-mindedness again.
Why don't you tell me about the new book?
The new book, well, having a little bit more confidence, it came as a rejangle, really, because it was partly, when I first talked to Bloomsbury, I said I'd got an idea, and they said, that's 2 books. And so, but it was almost the second half of that original idea, which was to help people at a slightly earlier stage, because Scale was about the problems that I'd found from leaping to 1 to 10 million. And one of the things I learned was, or needed to unlearn, was that if you put foundations in much better, then the transition to growth is a lot easier. And so I wanted to put that across and get people off on the right footing, I guess, which most people don't, or a lot of people don't, should I say. And so that was the sort of the first half of the last book. And also there was another element, which of course the first one came out right at the beginning of the pandemic, and I was looking and thinking, everything's changing, A lot of the book's still current, but in some ways, by the time it's launched, because of course it's a long process by publishing, is anything going to be the same at all? And it was and it wasn't, but there were changes, and there were things clearly which needed to have been in there. So for a variety of reasons, this second one needed writing.
What's the second one called?
Start for Success.
Start for Success.
Start for Success, yes.
Why did you do the Scale book?
Bloomsbury's choice. They wanted to do Scale, and that, I wasn't about to argue. I was talking about starstruck in their offices. I really was.
And you mentioned earlier a sort of mentoring and helping entrepreneurs. Is that actually part of your sort of weekly activities, daily activities?
I do a little bit of it. I mean, I contemplated doing, what to do, because I did miss the encouraging people and sort of that element of campaigning for entrepreneurship. I mean, I'm quite capable of, talking behind legs off a donkey on subjects I'm passionate about. So, I was wondering what to do with that at the same time as for writing side. And so one thing that occurred to me was coaching, and I thought, I mean, I am a qualified coach, but I wasn't sure I was capable of being that encourager. I'm too much of a fixer. You know, and so wasn't sure if that was a wise route to go down. Mentoring's different because you can say, "Well, my opinion is," and not be a bad coach. So I do enjoy mentoring, but I'll only do it if I think I can be genuinely helpful. But I do realise that I have, acquired a little bit of knowledge now along the way.
Oh, come on, Jan. A little bit of knowledge. Running a huge, successful business, writing books, writing art. You downplay yourself far too much, far too much. Why do you think two-part question, why do you think entrepreneurship is so important to the economy, a healthy economy? And secondly, why do governments, and I don't want to get too politically, but why do governments tend to prioritize larger corporations rather than entrepreneurs?
Yes, I'll try and behave when I come back to that second one. Why is it so important? I think, very simply, for lots of reasons. I think some people are made, like I was, certainly, probably yourself as well, not for me to judge, but, better at being an entrepreneur than we are at other things. And, it can be a good way to live life. And we ought to have the choice of doing that. And, be it as a micro business or as building a growth business, whatever it is, it's our lives.
Mm.
For the economy in particular, you only have to look at the sort of records of even the big corporations that die off or get absolved. Very few of them are, I mean, it's something incredibly low, like 2% are there after 50 years. I will have to look up the stats now as to the latest ones, but they disappear, even however big. So if you have a sector of anything where the top layer disappears, unless you encourage other ones to take their place, you just get it disappearing altogether. I mean, it's as simple as that for me. But if we're going to keep businesses growing, you have to feed from the bottom.
Absolutely. And why do you think not both sides of the government, whether it's Labour government or Conservative government, they don't prioritise entrepreneurship? And I don't know the numbers, but the proportion of businesses, it's something absurd, like 70% of businesses are small businesses. Why are we not supporting those businesses, whether they're micro businesses or scaling businesses?
I know, it makes me so cross. I mean, as I say, I'm trying not to get political, but I mean, in fairness, we did. I mean, like her or hate her, Maggie Thatcher and her England is a nation of shopkeepers. Vince Cable was very pro pushing entrepreneurship when he was business secretary in the coalition.
Yeah,
it's got much worse again now, I think, from any party. I hesitate to speculate, but it certainly is the case. Is it because they need the funds? I don't know. But it's such simple things like the microbiz 30-day pay on time campaign, which wouldn't cost the government anything and would make such a huge difference. But the people it would slightly annoy other bigger corporations if they had their hands smacked and were told they had to pay micro businesses on 30 days. Yet they won't even talk to anybody who represents that campaign virtually.
I think you're right. We're in a state of negativity surrounding entrepreneurship, and that's not just the governments. I think generally people as well are not seeing the benefits of the entrepreneurs starting businesses, whether it's a guy in the garage starting a tech startup or you starting a business in the kitchen. Those things are the bedrock and the starting points of like lots of taxation that gets done, whether it's corporation tax, whether it's income tax. There's a lot of positives that you can get from, and we just need to encourage entrepreneurship, which I don't think we're doing at the moment.
We do indeed, and you're absolutely right. I mean, I remember going to a business dinner, a women's one, and there were about 10 of us around the table, and a lot of them were bigger than me. But the woman who was holding the dinner, did a quick count up because she knew us all quite well. and said, how much roughly do we all contribute to the economy in taxes, in VAT, and national insurance, etc., etc. And the figure was blinding, and that was only 10 people. And the amount of government coffers we were filling, it's nutty. What is it? The sort of, again, huge high percentage of businesses in England are small businesses.
Yeah, that's what confuses me. That
I know.
really confuses me why governments are not trying to encourage those, because they're the future businesses, they're the future Googles, they're the future IKEAs, they're the future Tesco's.
Absolutely right.
They're all sitting there ready to be able to grow into the shoes when, as you say, when a large corporation like Tesco's might not exist in 10 years' time or whatnot, and they'll need to be the next generation coming through. Yeah, it frustrates me as well.
It's nonsensical. It's so short-termist.
Absolutely. What's the plan now for the next 2 to 5 years? Where do you see yourself as a business owner, as a writer, as a person, just generally? Where do you see yourself in 2 to 5 years?
Writing, definitely. I mean, at the moment, my focus is horribly short-lived because it's all about a book launch. It's so much work. I've forgotten. It's almost giving birth, and you just don't breathe or sleep for a few weeks, and that's only January, and then it'll be a gradual sort of wind down, but focus on that. And I think the combination of talking about entrepreneurship will still get to me. It still matters to me as much as it ever did. But trying to balance it with some sleep would be probably a good idea. I still do it, still overwork.
All right, we're coming to the end of the interview. I asked the same 6 questions to all of my guests. They're quick fire questions. They don't need a quick fire answer. The first one is, what's the best decision that you made?
Walking away from business.
Walking away, not starting, walking away.
Oh, I suppose, yes, no, but point taken. It was, yes, for us as a family, it just seems so long ago. That was the right decision at that point. But walking away from it probably has impacted more recent years. It absolutely changed my life for the better.
Oh, amazing. What's the best piece of advice you've been given?
I've been given. Stubborn. I usually make my own mind up. That's a problem.
Well, you take your own counsel, I suppose.
Listen to now, and I will go to him and say, "What do you think about this?" And I think right now it says no. It does say to push me on to doing the second book, because I nearly didn't do it, and I sort of got about halfway through, and I thought, this is too much. I don't know whether I want to go down this route again, and I'm glad he pushed me.
Good.
We'll go.
Who's helped you most in your career?
Again, more recently, I'd have to say my son, but that's getting a bit sickly. Through the whole career, I guess there were various people at various points. I mean, that's a long old spread of time. So, I had some good people who worked for me at times. I had some good friends who were entrepreneurs. Don't know if I'd pick out one particularly over the whole time.
Okay.
Real business for giving me a break. My first editor.
What regrets do you have?
Not getting out sooner. And that may sound funny for somebody who was an entrepreneur. I mean, mind you, if I got out sooner, I might have started a different business. But staying into something because you want to, you reach, and I see it so much with friends, and they keep going because, well, it's become their life, and it'll be better next year, and we'll look at it again next year. And when it's actually become toxic and miserable and horrible, and why do it anymore? Why do we do that to ourselves?
So there's certain coaches that I know and certain entrepreneurs, influencers, it's a terrible terminology, but influencers talk about knowing your exit strategy when you start the business. So you don't work it out as you go along. You actually think, right, what would I like to? Would I like to sell to a much bigger company? Would I like to pass it to my children? It sounds to me that you didn't have that when you started, or even throughout your business. You didn't really think about the exit.
I'd thought about it for the last 5 years. I mean, it didn't occur to me that, I was the sort of person that went around selling businesses, for the first 10, I think. But so no, I didn't. And coupled with the fact that, as I mentioned earlier, I dabbled with succession and the children and things. So by the time I thought about it, it was very late. And while I wouldn't say myself to people, you must have an exit plan from day one. I mean, if you've got one, great, but don't invent one from day one, because you must have one. But what I would say is learn about how to exit from day one, just in case life changes and you need to.
Absolutely. What are you most proud of?
What am I most what of?
Proud of.
Proud of. I was afraid you said that. I'm not good at being proud. Getting to this stage, I think, finally finding through the odd trial and tribulation, finding a place where I'm totally comfortable.
Amazing. Well, you should be proud of that. If you found that, that's half the battle, isn't it, really?
Yeah.
And we have covered this a little bit, you've said about passing the business, but what does legacy mean to you?
Bringing children up to be independent and to make their own choices and live their own lives. I didn't believe in, rightly or wrongly, in being clingy as a parent. Tempting. I mean, my son lives in Australia, and it absolutely makes me want to cry every day. But it's the best thing for him, so who am I to argue? So I think we don't know what's going to happen in the future in his lives or anything. So the more resilient you can make them, and the more you can equip them to be capable of taking care of themselves, I think that's the best legacy you can give them.
Yeah, absolutely. And do you feel anything with legacy, with all the articles, that the books? Do you feel there's a legacy that's going to be there for future generations reading your books and articles?
I think entrepreneurship changes very fast, and so I suspect they've got a shelf life to some extent. But I do hope that indirectly, as I said to you earlier, I think, I mean, if one book or one article helps one entrepreneur, the knock-on effect is huge. If they manage to grow their business, employ somebody else, or they manage to support their families, I would be proud of that.
Amazing. And lastly, where can people find you if they want to reach out to you?
They can find me at usual www. or whatever it is these days, jancavelle.co.uk.
Yeah, and you've got a lovely website. I was looking at it when I was doing my research. It's really well designed. It's really, really, really nice. It's got a nice bit about you as well, which was really helpful for this conversation as well. So yes, I'll definitely direct them to your website. Look, Jan, thank you so much for today. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you. I really think the one thing, which I don't say this very often, you really should be proud of the things that you've achieved. You have achieved some amazing things under some really difficult circumstances, and you've come out as a champion for entrepreneurship. So thank you so much for sharing your story today. I really do appreciate it.
My pleasure.
I really hope you've enjoyed that content. It's a really fascinating interview that I've done there. So please do, if you are enjoying this content, please do give it a like. Please do give a subscribe. It'd be really good to boost the subscriptions. It really makes a difference to the algorithm in YouTube. So thank you for that. If you do hit subscribe, hit the bell icon and you'll get all of the content. You'll get notified when all the content is available. Thank you so much for your time. It's really appreciated. Thanks a lot.